so much for joining us at North Valley Online. My name is Kaylee. If you are new here with us, or any time throughout the service, if you make a decision or need prayer, you guys can text NV Connect to 94090 to get in touch with one of our pastors. We'd love to connect with you guys throughout the week. Later on in our service, at the end of the message, we're going to take communion together. So I encourage you guys to grab a piece of bread, a cracker, and some juice so we can spend some time intentionally slowing down together in communion. We're going to continue to worship, and one of the ways we worship is through singing. So if you guys even want to stand up wherever you're tuning in, let's worship together.
Well, hello, friends. Hey, this is Pastor Joshua here. We are so glad that you're tuning in with us. We just want to let you know that we miss gathering with you in person, and we can't wait to gather again on site here in the near future. In light of that, we have not made any sort of official announcement yet as we continue to pray through that and seek wisdom and discernment. But in this season of waiting for that regathering, I want to invite you to do two things. One, I want to invite you to spend time in prayer for Pastor Ryan and for our elder team as they continue to seek wisdom and discernment to come to this decision. And then the second thing I want to invite you to do, if you've never served on a North Valley ministry team in the past, I want to invite you to make plans to start doing that when we do start regathering. You can let us know if you're interested in taking that next step by texting the word NVServe to the number 94090. 1 Peter 4:10 says, as each of you have received a gift, use it to serve one another. And that's what the church is all about, brothers and sisters in Christ, using those gifts to serve one another. And our North Valley ministry teams are a great, tangible opportunity for you to do that. But hey, right now, we're going to continue on with our service. Let's get ready for today's message as we continue our Better Together series.
Hey friends, so glad that you've joined us online. Today what I want to do is I want to walk through kind of a biblical perspective of this massive topic called a biblical response or biblical perspective to the Black Lives Matter movement and cultural Marxism. So this is like one of those messages you literally might want to grab a dictionary, definitely your Bible, and get ready. So, the question's been asked is why address a topic like this? I'd say, first of all, it's not out of routine for me as a Bible teacher, preacher, to address cultural topics from time to time. I can recall several years ago with the major shooting that happened in a nightclub down in Orlando, and it was labeled the Orlando Massacre, where a guy came in an act of evil and unleashed a fury of bullets on innocent people. And many of those people were in same-sex relationships. And I spoke up in that time because there was so much kind of whiplash going on in the Christian community about how to address that. Some calling it an act of God, and God was punishing them for their sins and their lifestyles. And I simply spoke up on that topic and said, it's an act of evil to take the life of another person's life, regardless of their lifestyle, their beliefs. That's an act of evil. And so in a manner such as that, I want to be able to pause for a moment and address the Black Lives Matter movement and as its ideology, cultural Marxism, as it relates to the Bible. So, recently in our culture, we've seen a massive rise in these racial tensions, and we as a church have responded by engaging the subject, and by God's grace, we tackled this topic in the right time, which this message series was planned more than a year ago, and it just so happened to be at this time. So we find this fittingly appropriate to communicate and respond to some of the racial tensions that are going on in our culture. And so with that being said, we felt like the need would be to respond in that. And so what we did as a church is we gathered some of our top leaders, one of our elders, one of our pastors, and other ministry leaders in our kids program and our youth program who were African Americans, black men and women, and asked them to join us for that discussion. So if you have not yet seen that, I would encourage you to go back, watch that, and hear, because it did the white majority of our church a great deal of good to listen and to learn about their experience of racism or discrimination in their own lives. It did me a great deal of good. And so in that, I want you to know where we're coming from. It's challenged our church, these racial tensions have challenged our church to engage in conversation, engage in issues that perhaps we were not paying attention to, and we've done that. And so recently I was in in my son's bedroom. We're playing Madden football, enjoying a time together like we do, getting some time on the Xbox with my boy. And there's a Black Lives Matter banner that comes up at the bottom. And I say something to him about it, and he responds with not knowing a whole lot about the organization, and then says, well, it's kind of a good thing. And that's a pretty typical response I've heard. And to be honest with you, at that time, I didn't know a whole lot about the Black Lives Matter movement. But what I did know is that this movement is making a message all over the media, from the gaming rooms in our homes to the corporate rooms adopting the Black Lives Matter logos, to our sports teams, to all across the media. There is this messaging that's going on. And I would say this is that what we did as a staff is we paused for a moment and went straight to the source of the Black Lives Matter movement website, which I would encourage you to log on and check it out. And we looked at their beliefs. And today what I want to do is I want to address those beliefs from a biblical perspective. We looked at those beliefs as a staff, and to be honest, we were shocked. We grew in a great concern for just the movement agendas. And so, but to say this before those of you who might have supported this movement in the past or think it's a great movement, let me make some acknowledgments personally and ask you to hang with me. If you call yourself a Christian, I ask you to hang with me as a brother in Christ or as a pastor or as an overseer, to hang with me as I make some personal acknowledgments about perhaps some of the good things that have come out of these racial tension times for me personally, and then we'll get into addressing it as a movement. But first of all, I want to say, in light of all that's happened in our culture, I acknowledge for me that in times of past, in my personal history, I have failed to mourn with those who are mourning, as specifically the Black community, on issues such as injustice to God's word, as Romans 12:15 says, mourn with those who mourn. To be honest with you, I have not engaged that as much as I should have. And when injustice is done and I see it on TV and the news, I admit and I acknowledge I have failed to mourn with those who are mourning as much as I should have. Furthermore, I acknowledge personally that I'm convicted by Scripture about issues of weightier things, weightier matters of the Christian faith, such as justice and mercy. Like Jesus says in Matthew 23:23, when he blasts the Pharisees, the religious leaders of his days, he says, you've done all these other great things, but you've failed to take into matter, into consideration, these weightier matters, such as mercy and justice. I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that I have not weighed into that, and I'm going to help you walk with me in that to understand justice from a biblical perspective, not just social justice as a cultural perspective. Furthermore, I acknowledge that there is injustice in our world towards blacks. I acknowledge that there is racism towards blacks. I acknowledge that there is discrimination towards blacks. You couldn't listen to the panel of leaders in our own church and deny what they were telling you, or thinking they're fabricating it, or oversensitive. It's real. There is a real racial bias as well for blacks in our country. I as well acknowledge and understand there's a tension and a frustration within the Black community. And many feel that they've been relegated in our history just simply to a Black History Month. I acknowledge that frustration, and I see the need for it to be the Black American to have their history woven into all of our history. I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that Christian seminaries should have taken a greater effort to ensure that Black men and women were being equipped theologically. I can think of so many God-honoring good seminaries that missed it, that should have engaged years before they did. I acknowledge as well that I have failed to see the unique contributions to theology by blacks on issues such as social or political issues from a biblical perspective. I think the black preacher plays a vital role as a key link in American society to help us understand beyond big theological topics such as substitutionary atonement or justification, but seeing the implications of the gospel message reach far beyond these issues of simply forgiving a sinner and giving him eternal life, but seeing the implications of how it plays out in the social everyday life, the relational life, and specifically in injustice. I acknowledge the patriotism of many blacks in American history, as blacks have fought in every American war for their country, and yet for years have been denied the honor, the dignity, the respect, and recognition they deserve as citizens of this country. I acknowledge that the rights of our citizenship and the vision of the Declaration of Independence for life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness has not been experienced by millions of blacks, at least in American history. I acknowledge that the strength and the dignity of black Americans in our country have endured incredible hardships and should be applauded for their transition from African freedom to American slavery, from the transition of American slavery to American freedom during the Reconstruction period, from the transition from the South to the North during World War I and following, from the transition from segregation to integration during the Civil Rights Movement. I acknowledge this, and I think, my goodness, has the black people of our country gone through so much and endured so much, and yet still so strong in so many regards. I acknowledge as well that the Black Lives Matter movement has brought a national awareness to racism and injustice in our country and has challenged our whole world to face it with the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. These are just a few. I acknowledge that. However, I do acknowledge that racism does exist in our country, but I do not believe it is either safe or sound to blame it on the system or the structure. Rather, I believe we must blame racism on sin. While there is room for reform in our law, we need not a revolution in our country, but a reformation of the heart turning back towards God. So I want to look towards what the Black Lives Movement stands for and warn you and caution you before you jump in. I was talking to one of my friends the other day that's involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, a man whom I would say is deeply Christian, loves Jesus, loves his Bible, loves his family, and I say to him, why are you a part of this movement? He says, because of the statement, Black Lives Matter. That's perhaps the most biblical line in anything that they do is Black Lives Matter. Of course they matter. If you saw last week the teaching on the Imago Dei, the Latin phrase for made in the image of God, all people matter. And in saying all people matter, just let me help you educate my white friends for a moment, is when you say that, it somehow in some way, and I understand, it belittles the concept that Black lives don't matter. It belittles them in a sense of saying, well, Black Lives Matter haven't mattered as much in the past. We're just saying it matters now. And I think we can agree with that. Black lives do matter. However, in the statements of what they are saying, it's important to know that most of the people that are involved in the Black Lives Matter movement perhaps don't have a clue. Like I said, I was talking to my black friend, Christian friend, and he said, I believe probably 60% of the people that are involved in the Black Lives Matter movement have no clue of the ideology that they hold to. No clue of the agenda that they hold, the political agenda that they have. But they care for black people. They care for civil rights. They care for justice. And so with that being said, I see the great need right now for the church to clarify what exactly does it stand for. And if you do go into that movement as a Christian, you've got to go as a missionary, rooted deeply in biblical truth, to represent, to show, and to share the love of Jesus Christ, and you hold exclusively to the Christian historical doctrines and beliefs for centuries that has been upheld by black and white and all other races to the Orthodox Christian faith. And that's going to be a challenge. And it'll cause controversy if you choose to do that. But let's look at the movement. I'm going to the media just for a moment, but they say this, that we are trained Marxists. According to New York Post, they say we are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories. And I think that what we've really tried to do is to build a movement that could be utilized by many, many black folk. This is Patrisse Cullors, who is being interviewed in this deal, and she begins to kind of lay out there for the public to see that there is an absolute Marxist perspective. So what is Marxism? So now we're going into sociology, anthropology, history, the whole 9 yards. Marxism goes back to the 19th century to a man by the name of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who argued that sociology and anthropology could be best understood by understanding class systems. So the class systems that we know now as lower class, upper class, middle class, this is what we would understand it as today. In essence, what they were teaching was the idea that all social conflicts came down to class struggles, the poor against the rich, the lower class being oppressed, the upper class being the oppressors. So this is where you get ideas like Robin Hood. You steal from the rich, give to the poor. There's a conflict. And what they're saying in classical Marxism is that all conflicts in society can be brought down to class structures. And much of that has to do with economics, with money. But later, Marx and others argued that there would need to be some sort of revolution, the poor overthrowing the wealthy in order to gain a better utopian world. If peace was ever to evolve, there had to be a revolution in a sense. And later, as Marxism kind of marched into the American culture through universities, professors, and politics, the ideas expanded from class to culture. And so now it's not just dealing with the oppressors as the wealthy, powerful, elite majority. Now it's dealing with gender, race, and so on. And so cultural Marxism is the vibe, it's the message, it's the mantra for the Black Lives Matter movement. So now the change between classical Marxism and cultural Marxism is classical Marxism is now pointing the finger as the oppressor is not simply as those that are wealthy, but now it's pointing the finger at those that are in the majority in race and in gender. So there is in a sense, what you will see and have seen perhaps, is a bit of a revolution, a fight in these circles. So there's been in this fight all sorts of categories, divisions, and agendas made. And I'll just talk about them just for a moment, and then we'll get further into it. But this ideology, cultural Marxism, actually perpetuates the notion that there is a need to overthrow the oppressive majority, which are the powers in our country, whereby division lines are not limited to class, but increasingly to cultural issues that are seen at the center, and they seem to center around race, gender, and as well as political parties as well. The cultural Marxists teach that the minority are the underprivileged, that the minority are the oppressed. These categories of privileged and oppressive categories include the following, but they're not limited to them. Being male in American culture today means that you are in a class that is privileged and oppressive, according to cultural Marxism. If you are a man and you are not only privileged against every other person on the planet, you're also in a category that's labeled oppressive. Additionally, if you are heterosexual, this puts you in the majority class, which means that you're privileged and you're oppressive as well. Meaning if you have a relationship between a different sex, heterosexual relationship, you're in the majority, therefore you're oppressive, therefore you're privileged, and you're subject. There's a bias towards you. Additionally, being cisgender. Here's where I told you need your little dictionary. And I had to, man, when I studied the Black Lives Matter movement, it's like I had to get with it. Some of these folks are deeply educated. That's great. They're using language and they're going back into sociology, psychology, history, anthropology, you name it, to dig in and to build this movement. But being cisgender, that means that if your sexual identity corresponds with your birth sex, in other words, I was born a man and I was born male and I'm going to stay male my whole life because that's the way God made me. That's because God, the way we studied the Imago Dei, made in the image of God. Being cisgender, if you're cisgender, you identify as your birth sex, that means that you're in the majority, you're privileged, you're oppressive as well. If you're able-bodied, meaning that you're not disabled, and that means you're privileged and you're perhaps oppressive as well. Being white absolutely means that you're privileged. It's called white privilege. And I think I'm reading a book on white privilege because I want to know the arguments on both sides. I want to listen. I want to hear. But if you're white, you are actually, there's a bias against you that you are oppressive and privileged as well. If you're native born, you are in an oppressive or privileged class according to them. If you're pretty, there's pretty privilege now. It's ranked as you have a privilege. If you're just a pretty person, you're more apt to get elevated, and the next person that's not so pretty will be discriminated. And so now there is divisions and categories on what's called pretty privilege. So all you pretty people out there, you're in the pretty privilege class. So basically, if you are the majority, is what it's saying, if you're on the majority side on anything with cultural Marxism, then you are part of an oppressive, privileged system, structure, classifications. In other words, if you're not like them, you're wrong, and now it's time to fight. That's a revolution. That's cultural Marxism. It's where the minority population in any category, wealth, race, gender, in anything, orientation, anything, they need to overthrow the entire majority to create a new normal. It's just a very radical approach in understanding. These are the ideologies that the co-founder says, this is what we're doing. We're trained Marxists. So what is the agenda from a cultural Marxist perspective is to change the majority in our country. That means if you're heterosexual, you can be homosexual. That means if you're cisgender, you can become transgender. If you're white, you should absolutely seek diversity. In essence, the view is suggesting that if you're a part of the majority, you're on the wrong side. And furthermore, if you don't become one of them, you're going to have to affirm them, not simply accept them. They do this by taking a minority of culture that is seeking alternative lifestyles, and they're seeking to normalize it and mobilize it. And this is what she even said as the founder. We're creating an ideology that can be utilized by many, many, and in her words, black folks. This is why we need education. This is why we got to, as Christians, believe God when he says stuff like this. Hey, first commandment, number 1, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. The mind is the greatest asset in all of Christianity and all of Christendom from all times is the mind. And in an issue like this, we're challenged to engage the mind. So let's stop talking about my pontifications about the issue, and let's look straight at the Black Lives Matter website just for a moment, what they believe. You can go there on the website yourself, blacklivesmatter.com, and what they believe, and you can find this out. They say, we make space for transgender brothers and sisters to participate and to lead. Transgender, for those of you that are still a little slow in this conversation, transgender are those that identify as a gender that are different from their birth sex. In other words, they just identify different from however God created them. They're going to identify very different. Furthermore, they say we dismantle cisgender. That means they're seeking to dismantle. That means to break down, to pull apart. If you ever dismantled anything, this is what they want to do. Dismantle cisgender, meaning identity that corresponds with birth sex. So they want to dismantle that privilege, that concept, and uplift black folk, trans folk, especially black trans women. examples of this. I recently heard a story about a girl who went to a school, and she's raised by lesbian parents, and she goes to the school here in our district and says, I don't want to be a girl, I'm a boy. Now you need to call me a boy name, and I need to go to the boys' bathrooms. And it created a major upheaval. And it didn't gain a lot of traction in the news because COVID-19 broke out, and then that became the new media piece for a long time. But these kind of things happen. Another story I heard recently was a guy who goes to work, and he announces that he now wants to be a woman. So he goes to his boss, visits the HR department, and the entire group there at the company has to announce now that this man is a woman and shall, from this point forward, be addressed as a woman, and has the responsibility, and any action against him is discrimination. These are tough issues, I get it. We dismantle the patriarch practice. That means male headship, leadership, like the Bible teaches. They dismantle patriarchal practices. That requires mothers to work double shifts so that they can mother in private even as they participate in public justice work. There's all sorts of problems here, and I don't have time to get into the depth of them, but I'll just continue on. Continuing, they say we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. That means basically a male and female married to one another who want to raise their children as a family unit. There's major problems with that. We'll address that in a minute. We foster a queer and affirming network. When we gather, we do so with the intention of freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking. Say that 5 times in a row. Heteronormative thinking is a worldview that promotes homosexuality as the normal or preferred sexual orientation. So they are trying to free themselves from this grip. And the challenge with that is that this is how God has created us, to be in heterosexual relationships. And so they're seeking to free themselves from who? The oppressors. And it is a political movement. Those of you who'd say, it's not just a political movement. No, it's a political movement. It's a political movement with crazy ideologies. And they say this, a CNN interview. So if you think that this is coming off as too conservative or too right-wing or left-wing or whatever, I mean, CNN, I think, would do a good job to represent this movement. They say this, when interviewed, they ask Patricia Cullors about this, what their agenda is. And she says this, what we're going to push for is to move to get Trump out. So whether you like Trump or not, he's the president of the United States. What you need to know is that there is a political agenda. I've heard from many that it didn't start out like this strong political movement to try to overthrow and get the president out of office, but it is that now. And so you have to know that. So let me answer the question with biblical response. What is wrong with the Black Lives Matter from a biblical perspective? I would say number one is trying to dismantle one's God-given identity. You and me, as a father or a mother, as parents, we've got to know that this concept is seeking and trying to intentionally dismantle one's God-given identity. This is going to create massive gender confusion questions. Bible says, so God created man in his own image, meaning man, meaning plural, male and female, in his own image. That means like God in many ways, in goodness and reflection, and we represent him. In the image of God, that is the Latin phrase, the imago Dei, he created him, male and female, he created them. God clearly makes our first parents, and by the way, Adam and Eve, their blood, if you were to go on Ancestry.com and had unlimited power, every single person on the planet would root back to their first father was Adam, and their first mother was Eve. And so we've got their blood flowing through our veins. Every person on the planet for all times, first parents. And the Bible says is that he's created them distinct and different, male, female, very different. And what the Black Lives Matter movement is seeking to do is to absolutely dismantle this by attacking the cisgender ideology. Secondly, what's wrong with Black Lives Matter from a biblical perspective? It's trying to break down the family. The family is at the crux. That's one of my values. This is where this bothers me perhaps the most. Because I'm going to raise my kids and they're going to know God made them a boy, they're going to stay a boy. God made them a girl, they're going to stay a girl. And we're going to celebrate the differences and how God's created different people with differences. And we're not going to try to blend them and make them the same. But now with this whole family breakdown, this concept of breaking down the family, the patriarchal system, breaking down the nuclear family, man, this is really tough. The Bible clearly says right after he creates male and female, he tells them in Genesis 1:28, God said to them, Adam and Eve, go be fruitful. That means make babies, fill the earth, multiply. That means multiply the human species, fill the earth. And you and I are the product of that. And this procreation mandate is the basic building block, by the way, for all of our world. At the heart of a community is a home, and in that home is a family. And at the heart of a community, as the community grows, there you have the city, there you have the country, and the nucleus of that building block is the family. And so when we think about this, research about the nuclear family, let me just speak to this just for a moment. But I found some research that's interesting is research from single-parent homes versus two-parent homes, meaning if you want to break down the nuclear family, this is what research says is going to happen. Children from single-parent homes are 5 times more likely to commit suicide. Let me say that again. Children from single-parent homes are 5 times more likely to commit suicide. Suicide's on an all-time high right now. This breakdown of the nuclear family, taking dad out of the home, breaking down a father and a mother, is going to break down this family even further. And research says that if that happens, a single-parent household, they're 5 times more likely to commit suicide, 6 times more likely to be in poverty, 9 times more likely to drop out of high school, 10 times more likely to abuse chemical substances, 14 times more likely to commit rape, 20 times more likely to end up in prison, 32 more times likely to run away from home. And oftentimes those kids are picked up and then they're sex trafficked, and it's terrible. So what I'm saying is it's an attack on our family. Furthermore, what's wrong with the Black Lives Matter movement from a biblical perspective is that it's trying to reverse the roles in marriage. Ephesians 5, 22 through 23 gives us an outline for what this looks like. It says that there's a wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and himself its Savior. Let me explain to you what this means and doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that husbands and wives aren't equal in value. No, God created a husband and a wife to be equal in value, different in role. In a theological conversation, it's called complementarian theology, that a man and a woman in a marriage relationship complement one another in an incredible way. And they're equal in value, yet different in role. This doesn't mean as well that the wife can't work. This doesn't mean as well that a wife can't exercise leadership. This concept of submission doesn't mean that the wife should be a doormat. It means that they need to cooperate, that they need to not compete over headship. Headship is this divine calling on the man in the home to sacrificially love and lead his family. And this attack against the nuclear family, to dismantle the nuclear family, is seeking to take the man out of the home and leave the kids there with a fatherless generation. This patriarchal system, you can think back in perhaps your family and in times past, patriarchal figures helped shape and build and bring up good and godly families. I've got a black friend of mine who told me, he said, my dad left the home when I was just a kid. But I thank God for a black preacher that stepped into my life, mentored me, and raised me up as his own. And then now he's creating that legacy, investing into his kids and saying, I'm not going to leave the home. I'm going to be here with you. This is an absolute reversal of roles and a breakdown of the family. Headship is this divine calling that challenges husbands to serve as providers, protectors, and pastors, spiritual leaders of the family, and to live and to love in Jesus and look to him as their example. And submission is a divine calling as well, to support, to respect, to defer to, and to uphold the husband's biblical role and responsibility in headship, which is ultimately to serve like Jesus, to sacrificially love his bride, giving up his very life for her. And this movement is seeking to tear apart this patriarchal practice and concept. And so it's a big deal. It is a big deal. There's other issues that I don't even have time to address, but I want to give you some encouragement. Go online. I've written a series of blogs in order to go a little bit further in this conversation and dialogue. And if that's not enough, I can send you more. I want to encourage you to do that. But you need to know that there is an incredible, good and great thing about marriage. Couples who practice their faith, regardless of race, are so much higher likely to stay married forever, for their lifetime. According to Brad Wilcox, a leading sociologist, University of Virginia, and director of the National Marriage Project, he finds this, that active Protestants, regardless of their race, who regularly attend church are 35% more likely, are 35% less likely to divorce compared to those with no affiliation. And then additionally, nominally attending conservative Protestants are about 20% more likely to divorce compared to the secular Americans. The takeaway is this, is that the divorce rates fall down when the Christian man and a woman in their marriage relationship are engaging in their faith. And so in all this, we've got to understand marriage is at stake, families at stake, identities at stake. And so I want to give you 5 practical steps kind of in closing. Number 1, I just challenge you that you listen before you label. Meaning this, you listen to people. If you've got a friend that's hashtagging Black Lives Matter or posting Black Lives Matter, don't be so quick to jump the gun. Remember what I said, almost 60% of people that are connecting themselves to this movement don't agree with the ideology, perhaps are even unaware of it, don't understand the political agenda. So listen before you label. If someone stands up against the injustice, hashtagging Black Lives Matter, or perhaps even marching in the streets and seeking to advocate for discrimination, don't automatically label them a Marxist. On the other hand, if someone stands up against this cultural Marxism or speaks up against the Black Lives Matter movement, this doesn't mean as well that they are racist and unwilling to engage on the issues. It means perhaps maybe they're uneducated. It means perhaps maybe they have they're identifying with a component of what's truth and they're standing up against it. And so I want to challenge you to not be so quick to label people and to build conversation. And that's what we did here at North Valley. We invited that panel up and had this discussion, and it's led to great conversations. I heard one story of a white guy was asking a black guy and said, I got a bunch of questions for you. And he said, I'm embarrassed to ask these because I should know this. But he asked him about 20 different questions. And at the end of their conversation, the black guy and the white guy are crying. And then they're laughing. And then they're praying. Because there is a level, and I think we ought to acknowledge it, that we don't understand. The Bible says, be slow to speak, be quick to listen. So listen before you label people. Number 2, I challenge you to go the extra mile. Jesus talked about going the extra mile. If somebody needs you to go 1, go 2. So go the extra mile. And you say, in what areas? Well, first of all, with people. Listen, we love people at this church. We love people from all lifestyles, all colors, all creeds. That's Christian. That's loving your neighbor. Go the extra mile with people. Listen before you label. Secondly, go the extra mile with the Bible. The canon of Scripture is here. Don't look to books Don't look to blogs as your canon of Scripture, as your authority of information. Look to the Bible. Go the extra mile. Thirdly, I challenge you to go the extra mile on issues. Stop engaging unless you first engage people and the Bible and have a good understanding of these issues. Don't just spout out your beliefs or your ideas without trying to at least wrestle with the issues. I mean, to be honest, like I told you earlier, like when there's an killing or an injustice in the black community, I acknowledge I failed to engage that. So I call my black pastor buddies now, and I say, tell me these issues. Well, let's talk about this. And then they tell me, I'm like, man, that's just wrong. I'm sorry. I'm sure that affects you in many ways in the black community around the country. So I want to challenge you to engage the issues, read the websites, understand the arguments, learn cultural Marxism, look at Marxism, engage the issues. Thirdly, I challenge you, practice what you believe. That means that you speak truth, friends. You speak truth, but you do it in love, according to Ephesians 4:15. It means practice what you believe. We believe that the second greatest commandment is to love your neighbor. Let's do that. We believe that the first commandment is to love God, and we're to do it with all of our mind, according to Matthew 23:37. Additionally, we got to practice what we believe by doing this, what Romans 12:15 says, to mourn with those who mourn. When there's sadness, don't just move past it. Engage it. There's an emotional ignorance, I think, that's in our country about learning how to posture yourself. Let me just encourage you real quick. Emotional intelligence actually has a stronger value in the workforce in today's world than intellectual intelligence, IQ. And so you need empathy, friends. You need compassion, friends. You need Romans 12:15. Mourn with those who mourn. Weep with those who weep. And Ecclesiastes says there's a time for all this stuff. There's a time to rejoice. There's a time to fight. There's a time to mourn. And we need to mourn with those who mourn. We need to practice what we believe. Fourthly, I challenge you, vote your values. We're in that season. For the state of Arizona, vote your values. What do you value? What's your authority? Is the authority the Bible? Do you hold to Christian beliefs? Vote your values. Don't just disengage. That's the dumbest thing that you could do. You're handing over your country to anybody if you do that. We have a unique freedom in this country to vote and elect our people, and what we do on a local level impacts the state level and impacts our country. And so you need to vote your values. I'm proud that our church, come November, we're going to open up our church and invite people to come for polling and be able to vote. We need to, as Christians, we need to engage politics. Why? Because God does love the government. And I'm going to speak on that next week. He's ordained and created government and law and enforcement. Can it be abused? Absolutely. Why? Because of sin. But we need to vote our values. We have a Christian responsibility as citizens, not only in this world, but in a kingdom perspective, so that we can get more kingdom values into earthly context. Amen? So vote your values. Number 5, I'd say this, is trust in God's sovereignty. Trust in God's sovereignty. As I've kind of analyzed the times, I think of times that we're in, and I have to remind myself, because it's negative. There's darkness. There's division. But no matter what, God's character is unshakable and he's good. I think of the story of Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers. He was falsely accused, falsely imprisoned. He was oppressed, but still he made the choice one after another to honor God despite his situation. And then he's promoted. He's promoted the second highest position in all of Egypt. And then when trouble hit, a famine struck in the land, and guess who showed up for help? His brothers. The very ones who sold him into slavery. And then Joseph comes to this point in his life and with godly wisdom says this, in essence, what you intended for evil, God meant it for good. And here's what I got to say, friends. We still serve a sovereign God. And he can use all sorts of evil to do a great deal of good. I pray that happens in your life. I pray that you step into that and claim that And we serve a sovereign God who can take every form of evil that man has intended on any side and use it for good. I know it's done us a great deal of good here at this church to engage, to listen, to learn. I pray that we do that together. Amen? Let me pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for the privilege, the opportunity, Lord, to teach your word. Lord, I pray that this message comes across and it's received and understood from a biblical perspective. I pray as well, Father, that we would engage. We would be faithful as Christians to love our neighbors. The parable and the Good Samaritan. We'd love those that are least like us. Might we do that? Father, I pray that you give us great wisdom, the wisdom of Solomon, Lord, the wisdom from your truth and your word. Might you grant us that to understand our times and to live appropriately. Father, we thank you for the work that you're doing in our hearts, and may it be in our homes, and may it be in our city, in our country. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey guys, great being with you. I want to encourage you. We're going to continue to worship on together and look forward to the coming weeks ahead.
Hello, North Valley family. It's me, Brian, and this is my wife, Alita.
Hello.
And we're excited just to take a moment with you to worship God together through communion. Communion is for all of those who believe in God, who believe in Jesus, and have given their lives to Him. And so my encouragement would be that if you're able, grab some bread, grab some juice, or some water, and let's take communion together. Today's passage we're going to be showing on the screen in just a moment is taken from 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And in this passage, Paul is encouraging the church to come together and remember what communion is all about. And just like we talked about in today's message, how important is it for us as a church to remember to put Jesus first? And in this moment, we're going to be reflecting on Jesus, on his body that was broken, on his blood that was shed, and hopefully reflecting on our own lives as well and seeing the areas where we know we need more Jesus. And so I'm going to go ahead and say a quick word of prayer for you guys, and then we're going to go ahead and take a moment or two with some scripture on the screen to take this communion together as the church. So Lord, we thank you for today, God. I thank you for our church and for the message that was preached today. Lord, I just pray that you would bring unity to your church. Lord, help us to see you. Help us to remember what you did for us. We thank you for your body that was broken and your blood that was shed so that we can have forgiveness of sins. Lord, help us to glorify you. Help us to live lives, Lord, that truly show you to all of those around us so that we are a witness to those around us. And Lord, just let this be a time of reflection. Help us see the areas in our lives where we need more of you, and help us to make those changes day by day through the power of your Holy Spirit. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
We're going to continue to worship today. We invite you to sing with us as we lift up the name of our Waymaker, Jesus Christ. Let's sing together.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. And even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. Never stop, you never stop working. And even when I don't see it, you're working. And even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. And even when I don't see it, you're working. And even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are.
Amen. He's our way maker. He's our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. We thank you so much for gathering with us to worship him. Again, if you're new and joining us for the very first time, we would love for you to let us know. You can do that by simply texting NV Connect to the number 94090. Also, if you've been joining us for a while now, you've been a part of our church for a while, and maybe you've made some great decisions in your life, maybe some next steps, maybe you're wanting to get baptized or anything along those lines, we would love for you to let us know. You can text that same number, NV Connect, to that 94090 number. Thank you so much again for joining us. Have a great week of worship. We hope that you can join us next week as we continue our Better Together series.